Hi, welcome. I'm Jo Beth McDaniel. I'm moderating this panel about residencies and retreats. And I have a great selection here, people who know this topic very, very well. I'm going to start with Bina Kamlani, who is an editor and also a novelist. She just finished her novel actually at MacDowell. She is also a reader for several top residencies. So many residencies will do that. They'll have different readers read over the applications. So she's going to have a lot to share about that. Also, Sandra Jackson Opoku, who also is a reader for many top residencies. And she is a novelist, and she's written plays, she's written everything. And I met Sandra at a residency actually last year. And she has been to, I believe it was 20 different residencies, and has a lot to share about that. I learned a lot from Sandra. And then Sean Miller, who is the program director at American Academy in Rome. And before that, he worked for the New York Foundation for the Arts, doing pretty much the same thing. He's making writers happy by, developing these wonderful residencies and programs. And American Academy in Rome has so many wonderful offerings there. So I'm happy to feature them in this. So, to get started, we're going to cover how to choose a residency. There are websites all over the place that list residencies. Some of them kind of specialize in the ones in the US. Some are more in Europe. So let's get started on that. Sandra, I know you've got a lot to add to that, like the places where you go to look and get information about residencies to figure out which one's a good fit for you.
Yeah, I've actually been to 25 artist residencies and counting. I have, starting next month, I have a residency every month except December through the end of the year. And it can be a daunting prospect actually choosing an artist residency because there's so many of them out there and there's so many different types. So maybe it might be helpful to start with like what an artist residency is. It's one residency that I went to. Was actually a retreat in Florida called Escape to Create. I think encapsulates that whole idea in the title of their residency. It's a way of getting away from the distractions of home, whatever those might be. Creating work in a different setting, whatever that difference may be, and getting the communal support and accountability from other artists and staff and community. They can be solo retreats where there's just one person, or a huge community of artists. Anywhere from, all the way up to 30 or 40 people. But I found that there are a couple of resources that have been helpful for me in choosing and evaluating artist retreats. And as I talk about them, I'll try to remember to put some of those resources in the chat. There are several, I guess you would call them directories of artist retreats that will give on a regular basis, either through their websites or if you sign up for their newsletters, information about open calls, upcoming deadlines. Many of them have searchable databases where you can plug in different, variables like the place, the country, the particular artistic discipline, and then find a retreat that is one that you might want to apply to. And here are some of those resources. One of them is called the Alliance of Artist Communities. Their website is artistcommunities.org. The other is the Dutch Culture, that's the name of the organization. And they do not necessarily restrict their information to the Netherlands, but it tends to be more of European as well as international residencies. The same way with the Worldwide Network of Arts Residencies. A Dutch Culture, by the way, is located at dutchculture.nl for Netherlands. The World Network of Artists Residency is Resartis, RESARTIS.org. There's also one called Rivet. I'm not as familiar with that one, but I know it exists. It's rivet.es. I'll put those all in the chat. And these are ways for you to, just kind of play around and see what's out there. See if there are any kind of special initiatives. For example, if you are working on a project that has to do with social justice or climate change or some sort of particular theme, you can often find that type of residency through these resources. But for me, one of my favorite resources is recommendations by other artists. If I happen to know that a writer has attended a particular residency, I'll ask them about it. I have also been contacted by people known and unknown who've asked me about my experience at a particular residency or retreat. And then a little tip is, if you read the acknowledgements in books, most authors will acknowledge in fact, this is something that is considered part of your, I guess, good citizenship as an artist, that if you've worked on a book or a project at a particular residency, you will acknowledge, this work was supported by McDowell or Ragdale or Yaddo. And so I often find out about residencies and retreats that I don't even know of and that don't wind up showing up on the directories by reading the acknowledgements. I did one last year at the Betsy Hotel, which the Betsy Hotel is in South Beach, Florida, and it doesn't show up on any of the databases, but a particular writer, I can't remember who right now, acknowledged the Betsy Hotel, and I applied and I was accepted. So those are a few ways that you might be able to, actually research what kind of residencies and retreats are out there. Residencies and retreats, kind of a fine line between the two of them. A retreat can be solo or it can be communal, but generally it offers living space and few, if any, meals, while residencies tend to be communal for the most part, and they tend to offer most meals and sometimes other types of support.
That's a good definition, I think, that is going to be the decision maker for a lot of people. If you don't want to cook your own meals or do your own, the residencies are more of a all-inclusive situation. I'm going to let Sean talk about this because the American Academy in Rome has this amazing, I would go there just for the food. I think I shouldn't say that, I guess, but it looks amazing.
Yeah, we about, I think it's been 10 years now since it's been 15 years actually since we adopted this program called the Rome Sustainable Food Program, and it's provides locally sourced food, and that it was developed by Alice Waters, who is from Chez Panisse and Berkeley. And the reason we did it though is one of the things that we feel is an important aspect of our residency is the community aspect. We bring in people from a variety of different disciplines in the humanities and the arts, and most of them we have 2 to 3 fellows representing each discipline, and we feel that them sitting together at their meals, everybody coming together, giving them a reason to come together for these meals by providing good food, creates interesting discussions and allows people to, for example, a writer might be sitting next to an architect, or they might be sitting next to a scholar of the classics, and they may get some different inspiration or different ideas for work. And so we feel that it kind of feeds off itself. And oftentimes we find that our fellows end up collaborating with one another. We really try to force people to kind of get to know each other and to spend time together. And it's a very fruitful effort, actually. We do get many collaborative projects each year from fellows in various disciplines. So that's the main reason we introduced that food program.
That's so cool. And that gives the writer more time to just focus on, or artists, I should say, since you bring in people from all these disciplines, as you say. Bina, would you like to explain how you have chosen different residencies through the years? Is there anything that jumps out that is like a red flag, or anything that makes you say, oh, this is where I fit in? Oh, you're muted.
I did what Sandra did. I haven't been to as many, but I've been to my fair share, at least 10 residencies. And the very first one, I have to say, is truly a gift from up there. It's an endorsement, it's a validation, it's supporting everything you do. It's saying, go on, do what you're doing. So how much choice is actually involved in choosing that first residency? I don't know. You go, I think it's very important to say you've been to one. So if it's not as though you can say, I have 20 to choose from. Often that will be the one that you get, and you go and build on that, hopefully, add others in the future. My very first one was at Art Omai, Ledig House, and I was gobsmacked that I got in there. I was a publisher. I was in editing. I had just branched off into writing, and I published some short stories, but it came through, and I got 2 months there, and I began my first novel. That was about 18 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. But I think the idea of looking at it is, or what I'm suggesting, you look at it as a gift, would then narrow down your seeming choice in the matter. I don't think there's that much choice. You can initially choose and say, this is where I'd like to go. These are the 10 places I'm going to apply to. But in the end, you take what you get. If you get all 10, wonderful. But if you don't, then you can really choose. But I think for most people, it's, oh my God, I got a residency somewhere. I'm so glad, I should add that there are different types of residencies. There are those where you end up cooking, where there is a generous for groceries, and but some people just don't want to cook. That's a less structured environment. Sometimes people just sort of come into the kitchen at midnight and cook up something for themselves because they've been working all day, and at others people combine and say, well, let's put our stipends together and cook, and you divide it up, and each person cooks something every night. That's worked out pretty well as well. But I think, and then there are others like Yado and McDowell, where the jewel in the crown is really dinner. Your entire day is spent in your studio, where there's like a river. If you're in the middle of it, it's like a river around you, and you walk in and you're in the current, and it sweeps you up and you're gone. So to come out of that and go to dinner is a touch of reality that I've always so much appreciated. It is more structured. Dinner is at 6:30 usually, to allow the kitchen staff to leave and go home at a reasonable hour. But it's always wonderful, because you never know. What's lovely about this is that you may hear a conversation at one table. You might get a snatch of it. And you don't have to, like a mad person, rush over to the person and say, can we have a conversation about that? Because you'll be meeting the person the next day and the next and the next, and this conversation can carry on. I could talk endlessly about what that dinner table really means in a residency. For me, it is the perfect end to a challenging day. And you might ask, what challenges could you possibly have? You don't have to do the grocery shopping. You don't have to wash dishes. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. True, but there are other challenges of a mental and creative sort, which can be as perhaps worse in some ways, dare I say it, perhaps worse, because there's so much torture involved, and so much despair, and so much a lack of what am I, confidence, what am I doing? Should I just tear this up and throw it out of the window and begin again? And there's all this angst, this deep soul searching that goes on, which I think is exhausting. So, there is that as well. To go back to your original point, I want to add one thing. Poets and Writers is extremely good. Give you a sense of when the deadlines are, who's offering what. If you subscribe to it, it's just I don't think it lists everything, but it lists enough for you to go on. Have any of you looked at it? Yeah. Poets and Writers, yeah. Well, we can go back to the social aspect of it later, but unless you want me to launch into that now.
Well, no, let's get into that when we
later.
I wanted to cover how to make your application stand out. And here we've got 3 experts on this, because you probably can't even count how many applications you've read. So what are kind of the do's and don'ts of applications to residencies and retreats?
I would right at the beginning that authenticity is very important. Just be real, don't try to aggrandize what you've done. I just say, this is what I've done. This is what it means to me. This is how it's helped my writing career. This is where I am at the moment. I think people respond to that better than pages and pages of trying to make an impression somehow. That's what always, I'll share a story. There was a woman when I was a juror for Residency. I very much wanted Indigenous, writers to apply, and there weren't that many in the crop that I was seeing. And I wondered how one could reach out to them. And then I came across this one application where the writing was so raw, but it had a massive energy to it. It just swept me off my feet. And she didn't have any credentials. She had her writing, and it was stupendous. And of course, I went for it. There wasn't much to support it except the writing, but the writing was so good. It was just, you felt that if this person had a bit of guidance, had a little bit of teaching, she would be superb,
I love that. So she wasn't a MFA grad. She wasn't somebody who had been published, but she knocked you off your feet just with
really
her.
the energy was so real. And so for me, that's an example of authenticity. Send your best work out, and send out work that really you feel is deeply connected to what you're trying to do, for your deeply connected to where you want to be.
I think Sean can address that, because
Yes.
the application for American Academy in Rome is daunting a bit. I actually started it and then I was like, can't go anywhere in 2022 right now. So, you know, but let's see, you require a CV, right? And
Yes.
then, yeah, so you tell what makes the application stand out.
This was the question I was actually, I feel the least good about answering, just because what I always tell people is, you know, I mean, obviously you want to put your best foot forward, you know, you want to represent yourself well, but I think part of that is not trying to guess what the jurors want. Just do what is, as Bina was saying, do what's naturally you want to do. What, you know, when you propose an idea of what you want to work on, you know, in our case, it does help if there is some need to be in Rome, but it's not an absolute necessity. And most of the people I would say who do win the Rome Prize in Literature do not have a need to be in Rome. It's just we're giving them the space and the time to do their work there. You know, and it's great that they're going to be in this great place, but they don't actually have to be in Rome. And so don't feel, you know, I mean, some organizations may have that as a requirement that you know, they may have specific requirements for their proposals. But in our case, I know it's just, we want you to have a project that you are planning to work on. In our case, we don't even hold you to it. If you get there and you decide to go in a completely different direction, that's fine. But we do need our jurors to have something by which to judge, you know, your application. So the things we ask for are the CV, the proposal, and a writing sample. And the writing sample does not have to be at all related to what you're doing. It's just a sample of your past work. We tend to favor longer samples. You know, we allow up to 20 pages, but we would prefer a longer sample from one piece rather than a bunch of excerpts from smaller pieces. So that seems to be what our jurors prefer anyhow. And but like I said, the main thing is don't try to guess what they want. Do what is natural for you, because it's going to come out one way or the other. You know, in our case, part of the requirement is you also have to interview with the jury. So you have that opportunity to, you can talk more about what you want to do in Rome at that point. You know, in the application, it's more important to represent yourself as a good writer, and as somebody who's very focused and has some direction on what they want to do. Again, you can change that once you're there, but you should show some direction in your application.
Cool. Yeah, I heard that a lot from different directors, that they want to see some focus, and they want to know that you're not just going to show up with no plans. Even if you change your plans, that they want you to at least show up with plans. Sandra, I think you and I had a discussion about that a few months ago too.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, I would say, you know, at least 80 to 90% of our residencies want you to have a project. And it should be a compelling project and something that's well thought out. You know, it could be a book project or a collection of poems or essays, but something that is compelling. And again, I agree wholeheartedly with Sean and Bina that it should be your very best work, you know, your absolute best work. I also think it's important not to have your application stand out for the wrong reason. So follow instructions. Sometimes the applications can be complicated. So I think it's best to give yourself time to really study and read through, you know, do a sample application. Oftentimes artist communities have info sessions that will be online, you know, virtual info sessions, either, you know, right before the deadline or a couple of months before the deadline, where you can ask any questions that you want to. But I'm always disheartened by the number of applications that are disqualified because the applicant hasn't followed directions. Like oftentimes applications, like the writing sample is supposed to be blind, which means it shouldn't have your name on it. But people, if they don't put their name on it, they give some kind of information within the text itself that gives their full name and identity. So, and being able to follow the instructions is really important. CVs should be, except maybe in certain situations, like perhaps with the American Academy in Rome, perhaps a more academic CV might be appropriate, but it should not be the type of resume that you would use to like apply for a job, or your academic resume if you're an academician or a professor. It really should be a resume that is focused on your work in the arts as much as possible. So it would include publications, any other residencies that you may have done, prizes and awards that you've won.
That's pretty cool. And I remember we were talking about this last summer, that you started applying to MacDowell, which is one of the top residencies. It's like getting into Harvard. Actually, I think it's harder to get into MacDowell than Harvard. The percent is like 2% or something. Harvard's, I think, 6%. So, and so you started applying to MacDowell like 2 decades ago or something, and every couple of years you would apply again, but you said your applications got better. Like you got better at that process. Was there anything that stood out that, you just sent in better writing?
Yeah, I guess, probably over the year, and not probably, it's pretty safe to say that my writing has improved over the years, and applying for residencies and fellowships and awards is a skill, just like writing is. Mm-hmm. And so I've gotten better at that. And I think some of it is the luck of the draw. Like sometimes I think people disqualify themselves from applying for things because they think they'll never get it. And was always of the opinion, well, I'm gonna get this residency. It just hasn't been my time yet. I had a conversation with an artist, a male writer, I won't say his name, who I met at another residency, and he happened to mention having been a resident fellow at MacDowell, and I said, "Oh yeah, I've been applying for a number of years. I haven't gotten in yet." And he said rather dismissively, "Oh well, you have to publish a lot to get into MacDowell." And had I been a different type of person, I might have let that discourage me from applying again. But within the 2 years of hearing that remark, I was sitting at MacDowell working on my novel. So never let anybody, including yourself, diminish your value as an artist. There's a feeling, a perception, which may not be entirely inaccurate. That's, the residencies are elitist, and they look down on journalists and people who were writing in so-called genre fields of literature, like children's writing or science fiction, or that sort of thing. I think that there are ways in which some of these residencies have become much more inclusive and accessible over the years.
They have, no question.
And yeah, so I don't think that, you should allow those perceptions to disqualify you. You should follow the instructions. Like if you're applying to somewhere, I can't, an example doesn't come to mind that is specifically for poets, and you're working on a novel, you're not going to get it. You're absolutely not going to get it. But this sort of idea of high and low culture and what is valued and what is undervalued is something that too many of us internalize, and we need to throw that out the window.
I'd like to add one thing to that, which is don't look at the rejections, just think positively about the future, because the panel of judges changes every year. It's not the same people. And how something comes across you at one, it'll be different. So I think keep applying. Whoever's considering applying to residencies, just keep applying. Doesn't matter how many rejections you've had from a place. Let's try again, because again, the panel changes all the time. Yeah.
I would second that and say, not only does the panel change, but also you don't know how big the pool of applications is. And it doesn't mean that they didn't like your work. It just means that maybe they like somebody a little more. This group of people like somebody a little more. You may have gotten pretty high. And so a rejection isn't saying that you're not a good writer. It's just saying
slamming the door.
We don't have room for you at this time, Yeah.
I think those are all good points. And I'd like to add here too, because Sandra and I had talked about this before, that there are residencies that are looking for moms with children. There are residencies that are specifically looking, as you said, social justice projects. McDowell just started this year, I believe, a separate, same residency, but just for journalists. They felt like they needed to add, to support journalism, which is obviously in dire straits right now in a lot of areas. And so I think, some of the old elitist, I think residencies were very much East Coast for a while, kind of, and, within a certain publishing circle maybe or something, but have realized they need to draw from a larger pool and have different criteria. So, I think that's a very important point to make here. I wanted to talk about how to spend your time wisely at a residency. Now, there are residencies that go for a year. There are some that go for a month or two, or, a week or a few days. They're all different time periods here. So obviously you would do this different if you had a whole year. But Bina said something really interesting right before we came on today about this, because I said, well, this is kind of a controversial subject. And she's like, no. So Bina?
It's not at all. I think to have a good sense of how you want to use your time before you get there is important, even though that may change drastically once you do get there. I think some people go to residencies because they've had a huge and very challenging bout of creativity before they got there. And this is downtime, this is brooding time, this is thinking time. That's fine. That's what they want out of that. Other people have edits from a publisher that they're trying to deal with while they're there. So they've got a very focused agenda. If you're beginning a novel, I think that's the most challenging thing, to begin a novel at a residency, because that beginning stage is so fraught. It's like not having the right key to the door. And so you're trying many different keys and finally you find it. But it can be a little frustrating if you've earmarked that time to get a certain amount done, a certain amount of your first novel done. I found residencies most valuable for me when I'm editing, when I'm brooding about certain parts. Brooding is such a luxury. Who has the time to brood, But to be able to sit in a chair and say, okay, dinner's at 6:30. I don't have to worry about anything until then. I've got 4 hours to brood. That just releases you. And you start thinking, well, I could do this differently. I'm going for a walk. This isn't quite working. It's not hitting the mark. Let me think about it a bit and come back. That is the greatest luxury of all. To not have to compromise with what you've got on the page, to be able to tear it up and start again. I find that such a gift. Related to that is a second thing. I said earlier that some people consider dinners a little bit intrusive because they've just got going and now they have to put everything away and go for dinner, and then they rush back to their studio and I've always found it, as I said, the jewel in the crown of residencies, because where else in the world are you in the company of people with the same thoughts and the same impetus driving them as you? Your peeps, that's who they are, and it's just, to me, so miraculous. You hear a conversation about counterpoint and motifs in music. You hear how you can control pace in a novel to get the dramatic effect you want out of a scene. You hear about brushstrokes and how they can direct the viewer's eye to become towards the focal point in a painting. Where else can you hear conversations like that and find synchronicities in your work and their work? That, to me, is the magic of this. The magic is also hearing someone say, well, Millie Thiel would never have said that. And you slide into a seat next to them and say, wings of the dove, my God, Millie Thiel lives. Where else are you going to hear this? It's just such a thrill. I can't even begin to describe it. It's such a thrill to be in the company of people who are thinking like you. They're on the same drive, For me, it's the most exciting thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's why I prefer communal residencies to solitary retreats, because you have this wonderful opportunity to interact with other artists. I think that one thing that I kind of struggle with in getting the most out of a residency is managing distractions. It could be distractions from within the community, whether it is, I don't know, there's some of residencies are a lot more social than others, where people are getting together in the evenings, or there are a lot of open studios where artists invite each other to see their works in progress or readings, or, going out, to the, neighborhood bar or whatever. So I think it's important to have some downtime so that you don't get stale. And I think that helps alleviate frustration, when you have built-in downtime, or you can find some downtime. But I think that you should also be aware that the social options are just that, options. They are not obligations. And if you need to rush back to the studio after dinner to
need to do it.
Yeah, that's what you need to do. You should not feel obligated to be a part of the social. And then there are the distractions that come from the outside world. I have the most problem with that, because I'm a mother, I have a family, and now that when I first started going to residencies, we didn't have cell phones so much, but now everybody has a cell phone. They know they can reach you. So I think that that's the important thing, because you have left home for a reason. And if you could have gotten it done at home, you would have. And so, that goes everything from limiting social media. At McDowell, it was easy for me because I didn't have Wi-Fi in my studio. So, I couldn't. I also, often I will, if I'm going on an extended retreat, I will send out a vacation notice on my email that, I'm going to be on sabbatical for the next month. It may take a while for me to respond. And, hopefully people will respect that. And then if they don't, then, you have to, make some decisions. I refrain from watching TV when I'm in a residency, because I just find that very distracting. And in most cases, that's easy because many residencies restrict TV access to public areas. You have to actually go to a certain place to watch TV, and you might not be able to watch it except at certain times of the day. And then I think most importantly I take social media diets when I'm on a residency, whether it's because I'm forced to, because I don't have Wi-Fi access. Some of these communities are in isolated wilderness areas where the Wi-Fi access is limited. Or I will just force myself to, stay off of social media, to, a lot of times I find myself wandering over to the internet because, oh, I've got to do this research. Oh, but let me just see who's, what they're saying on Instagram. So if I really do need to do online research and I come across points that I know I'll need to research, I'll write a list and do that later in a dedicated period of time, rather than, interrupting my work. People have obligations that sometimes they don't, they can't get rid of, like meetings and work responsibilities. But as much as you can clear that away from your plate, I think will be helpful in terms of having a successful arts residency.
McDowell, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, I completely support that. What we always tell our fellows when they arrive is, to really look at this as an escape from their normal day-to-day lives. We've sent them to the academy. They either go for 5 months or 10 months, depending on the half-term or full-term fellowship. And while we're there, we want them to, not to be returning to their jobs, even online. We want them to escape as much as possible and to just really focus on the project that they've proposed and the work that they want to do for themselves. And Sandra, you also mentioned distractions, and we do provide a lot of distractions at the Academy. We have a very robust schedule for programming that has lectures, conferences, concerts, walks and talks throughout Rome. But we tell people when they arrive during their early orientations, you don't have to participate in any of this. We hope that you will choose some of it, but we realize, there might be times when you really need to focus and do your work, and that time you have to push all this aside, and that's totally fine. But we hope that throughout the time that you're there, at some point you'll be able to do it, because it does also, it again enhances the community aspect of the Academy. So we do encourage people to do that, but at the same time we recognize that they may need to take time off from all of those things. And what you were saying was go social media. We only have one TV at the Academy, so we don't worry too much about that.
I don't
Sean,
have.
Oh, go ahead, Bina.
No, I don't have a TV, so I don't have to worry about that. But no. Were you saying something? Were you asking?
Oh, I was going to mention that Sean probably has some stories, since you've been at the American Academy a while, some of the work that's come out of the residencies there, and some of the projects that, your success stories. You've been around, what, 100 years?
Yeah, we've been around for 127 years, actually.
Oh.
20, yeah. And literature hasn't been part of, I think it was introduced in the 50s, and it's kind of been on and off since then. But we've recently taken a major commitment to it. It used to be handled by the American Academy of Arts and Letters. They would select our fellows, but we've removed them from it, and now we do the selection ourselves. And so a recent success story would be Anthony Doerr. He was there. He wrote a book about his time in Rome called 4 Seasons in Rome, and then his Pulitzer Prize winning book, which I can't remember the title of right now, was the one that, yes,
yeah,
he wrote while he was at the Academy. So yeah,
cool.
Yeah, or started it while he was at the Academy. So that's, and then we've had a number of fellows who, when the work that they were working on in Rome is published shortly after their time there. Most recently, I know Alexandra Kleeman, the book that she was working on in Rome was just published. And so it oftentimes happens, it's,
Cool.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It is, yeah. And Sandra, you said that one time that before you went to a residency, you thought they were kind of like a luxury, but that's how you finished your first book, right? It was, you had like 2 months or something.
Yeah, I had 6 weeks. My first residency was 6 weeks. It was at Ragdale Foundation, which is about an hour and a half north of Chicago, which is where I live. And I just applied on a whim. I knew about Ragdale. I had gone there for public programs, but I just thought, that residencies were kind of snooty and effete. And also, I realized as I've gotten older that maybe it was a kind of an idea of I'm gonna reject them before they reject me, a kind of maybe a lack of confidence in my work that, maybe I wouldn't be able to get in. But I did, I applied. They had a special initiative, which was called the US Africa Writers Project, 6 writers, 2 from the United States, 2 from the African diaspora outside the United States, and 2 from the African continent. And I was like, well, I would really like to meet those writers and to be around them for 6 weeks. And so I applied, and in those 6 weeks, I was sold on residencies because I got more done in those 6 weeks than I had probably gotten done in the past 2 years. And, my first novel came out of that experience.
Cool. Yeah, and it's, Bina, go ahead.
I don't know what I would have done without the residencies I've been to. I don't think my work would have been where it is. I don't think I would have, such amazing things can happen. Last year, I was at Yaddo, and around the dining table, I was telling them about a school in India and the nuns there. And they were a bit racy, those nuns. And so, the story just went on a little bit. And the entire table, they said, whatever you've come to do over here, put it aside and write this, just write this. And it was a challenge. I went away, I thought about it. And in, I don't know, a week, I had a story done. Of course, it went through some, drafts, but I got it out. And it was published 3 weeks later, maybe 6 weeks later, in Epiphany magazine. Thematically, it was connected. So it magical, somebody felt that there was something there, encouraged you, you went away, you revised your plans for what you were going to do, you focused on this, and it happened, so yeah.
That actually happened to me too. At the place I've been to the most is Dorland Mountain Arts Colony near Temecula, and they're little cabins. It's definitely, there was a little fox that kept coming to my cabin. And somebody mentioned earlier about how these places are often remote. I think the first time I went there, I was a little freaked out by just how dark it got at night. And it's not one of the communal things because you're in your own little cabin. And, it really, there's something about that isolation. I was just back there a few weeks ago at Dorland, and just it lets you like sink down into the work deeper somehow. To me, having that isolation and Wi-Fi not really working, and all that. But I was there with some friends one time and had gone to work on this novel, and ended up doing just like you say. It was we were on a walk together, just talking, and the friend just turned to me and said, "Why aren't you working on that?" And that's kind of all it took. I was like, well, because, and I didn't have good excuses. So I bet at American Academy in Rome, you probably, because you're bringing these people from all these different walks of life together, you probably got some good examples of that collaboration too, of, inter-humanities or, whatever.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we had a composer a composer fellow who collaborated with, I swear, I think he collaborated on projects with somebody from every different discipline. And it was just like, he was just like, when I was reading his final report, I was just like amazed, you know, like, what, did he do any of his own work, you know, just on his own, you know, because he, I mean, it was great, you know, it was, people really enjoyed working with him because I would read their reports, you know, saying that I had this great opportunity to work with Jonathan Berger on this project. And so we get a lot of those. And some people, we had a composer recently who teamed up with an architect, and they did a project together in Rome that they ended up bringing to the New York Philharmonic, you know, and it was, so some of these turn into really big things, you know, sometimes they stay at the Academy, other times they leave the Academy and become really big projects. So it's exciting stuff, and we're you know, we're always really proud of, you know, the work that our fellows do, and you know, love publicizing it whenever possible. So.
I love that you get that report afterwards. Like, he was like the Kevin Bacon of his.
He was.
You know, so many times I know what happened there, but I don't really tell people. So it's cool that's a really important thing for residencies to. And you know, there's one other thing I want to bring up again about the American Academy of Rome, and this is true of a lot of residencies. You've got the big old Rome Prize, the 1 year. I mean, Ava DuVernay is a fellow this year, I believe, the filmmaker. Oh.
She's a resident, yes.
Yeah, resident, yes. Yeah. So that's like the big deal. That's like, you know, but you also have the Visiting Scholars Program.
Yeah.
So can you talk about, because a lot of residencies do this, they'll have the long programs, and then sometimes they have, sometimes they have a full scholarship and a stipend, or sometimes they have a way for you to pay, you know, like Dorland has scholarships, but it's like 400 something a week, and it's, gosh, I think it's even less, like 800 a month or something to go there, or you can try to get a scholarship. So, you know, a lot of residencies have these kind of different levels. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we primarily have 4 levels. The reason for our existence is the Rome Prize, and so these are the ones that are either they used to all be like a full year. We've knocked it down to now 10 months, and some of those are half term, so they're 5 months. So that's where we're paying you. We're giving you a stipend of either $16,000 or $28,000, providing you with housing and meals and a workspace. So it's either a studio or an office space plus your living space, and those are the ones where it's very competitive. You apply for the Rome Prize, and this is what you get. The next level down would be our, Ava DuVernay. She was an invited resident. So these are people who are invited by our president or by our director. And again, we don't give them stipends, but we do pay for their housing and meals, and oftentimes their transportation over to Rome. And they're usually people who are at more of a senior level in their field, who we used to say they were mentors to the Rome Prize Fellows, but we don't really say that anymore. They're there to do their own projects, but they tend to be at slightly higher levels. And then we have a program called Affiliated Fellows, which are where other organizations send people to the Academy. For example, Columbia University sends a couple people each year, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, different art centers and universities throughout the country send people for anywhere from 4 weeks to several months. And then the final category is visiting artists and scholars, which is where anybody who is working in one of the fields where we offer Rome Prize can apply, and they pay for their own stay at the Academy. So there's still an application. You still have to show examples of good work, you know, but it's a little bit easier to get in. And that way, if you want to go for, our minimum now is 4 weeks. It used to be 2 weeks, now it's 4 weeks, but you can go anywhere again from 4 weeks to several months. However, it's not cheap, but it's cheaper than staying in a hotel, I would say. And you're also part of that community. So that's the bigger benefit of it.
And with that amazing Italian chef, you know,
yes, exactly.
The sustainable dinners, which is, you know, just sounds heavenly, actually. So I'm just going to open this up. If anybody thinks, is there anything we didn't cover? We've got 5 minutes here. We talked about, oh yes, Sandra.
I just wanted to, just a quick word about what I consider being a good residency citizen, that I think it's important for people to know. And every one of the 25 residencies that I've been in, there are no smoking. You can't smoke on the grounds or in the buildings. So oftentimes there's a designated space. Many of them have policies on the use, drinking alcohol and drug use. Of course, racial, sexual harassment, any type of bias. It's a zero tolerance policy. But I think the most important thing that people have to keep in mind is being considerate and aware of the privacy of other residents. You know, it's not a situation where you can go knocking on people's doors or, God forbid, proselytizing or, selling Mary Kay, or believe it or not, that I've heard of a situation where that happened. So, it's about, there are a lot of benefits and amenities that are accrued to you as a resident, but it's also important to sort of be aware of the creative space and the personal space of others and the staff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to add something similar, which is, I think people need to be very aware of what is okay and what isn't okay now. This has changed over the years. People who've been going to residencies for a long time think that things that they could do, say 10 years ago, that it's still okay to do them. It's not. And I think you need to be very well versed in that. You need to inform yourself about what socially is acceptable and unacceptable today. What you might consider as just a little nudge or oh, let's do this, might come across as pressure to someone. I think being very aware of other people's sensitivities to issues. I'm very aware of this because at Yaddo they have a special, it's known as SAP, Special Assistant to the President. And what you do is you take the artists, incoming artists, to their rooms, you tell them about the protocol, you keep an eye out, you're just open to any conflict or any tension or anything like that that's going around. And generally, if something isn't working, there is a mechanism in place to deal with it. I think people should know that and not be intimidated by, I don't want to go to a residency because too many people, it could get complicated. No, the mechanism to take care of tension or any kind of conflict is already in place. You're not going to have to deal with it on your own. I think it's important to know that.
I think that's really, because so many people who go to residencies are women solo. So I think that's a really important point because, it maybe the perception of residencies back when Yaddo was a romantic place, let's put it that way. A lot of stories about it written since. That has changed, and that's a great thing that it's a place to escape, as you've all said. So we just hit our 1 hour mark. So I'm going to say goodbye. And I thank all of you for being here and sharing this wisdom with us. And look forward to seeing your work that's come out of the residency soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you.